Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Duthier. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these screens behind me. These are all feeds coming into CBS stations across the country. If it's happening out there, it's happening right here on CBS News 24/7. A second wave of deadly explosions rock Lebanon as Israel declares a, quote, new phase of its war on its northern border. Iran is accused of giving stolen Trump campaign information to Biden campaign staffers unsolicited. What we know about the alleged plot to infiltrate the upcoming elections. Plus, high-profile January 6 sentencings in Washington today include some of the very first rioters who breached the Capitol. We are following the very latest from the courthouse. This is CBS News 24/7. Lebanon's health ministry says the second wave of high-tech attacks targeting Hezbollah has killed at least 20 people and wounded more than 450 others. Look at these images coming into the broadcast center. Walkie-talkies now exploding in homes, cars, and grocery stores on Wednesday. Of course, this comes just a day after pagers used by Hezbollah members blew up across the region. Though Israel has yet to comment on the attacks, its military says it's entering a new phase of the war. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb has more on the rising tensions.
Well, we're frankly in uncharted territory after a second day of synchronized explosions of hundreds, if not thousands, of communication devices turned bombs here in Lebanon that are being blamed on Israel. Many people here telling us they no longer trust their own handheld devices. Now, this, of course, comes after we've now seen 48 hours of explosions across Lebanon. The first, of course, being pagers, which had exploded almost simultaneously across the country, killing around 12 people and injuring around 2,700. Some of those injuries involve people having lost their eyes or even their fingers. Then, again, just a day later, we saw walkie-talkies exploding, this resulting in the deaths of over 20 people and injuries of hundreds more. Now, all of this comes at a time when Hezbollah says that it blames Israel for these explosions, but of course trying to understand how Israel was able to infiltrate its communications and perhaps more importantly, weaponize them. Now, we've been doing some of our own reporting and have found that there are some shell companies which connections to Hungary, which may have been used by Israeli intelligence services, but Israel, of course, is not confirming. And this as Hezbollah vows revenge for the booby-trapped devices, and as Israel's defense minister announced a, quote, new phase of the war, saying the center of gravity has shifted to the north, and forces from Gaza are now being moved to the northern front with Hezbollah, sparking fears an all-out regional war is closer now than ever before. Vlad.
All right, MTS, thanks so much. Let's bring in CBS News Pentagon reporter and producer Eleanor Watson. Ellie, as you know, the Israeli chief of staff says the price for Hezbollah must be higher. Break down what you're learning from officials, what that is actually signaling to Hezbollah.
Yeah, Israel has made no secret that they're gearing up for a major military operation against Hezbollah. They say they need that operation to return thousands of Israeli citizens back to their homes in the north that have been displaced because of the tit-for-tat strikes between Israel and Hezbollah. These two attacks, the pagers and the walkie-talkies, are an impressive demonstration of Israel's capability to cripple Hezbollah's command and control. We don't know why they launched those attacks this week, but it could serve as a way to pressure Hezbollah to come to a negotiated agreement that returns Israelis to their homes without a war, which neither side at this time wants.
Ellie, there was another theory floated by Michael Morrell, who you know as the former deputy director of the CIA, who's now a CBS News contributor, obviously. He reported on our show this morning that the other thinking about what is happening right now are the fact that on the northern border between Lebanon and Israel, Israelis have not been able to return to their homes since October 7th. And this may be a way to pressure Hezbollah to pull back from Israel's northern border. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, well, the two attacks have definitely crippled Hezbollah. I think Hezbollah's leader back in February, I think, made an announcement that the members of Hezbollah should not be using cell phones because they feared that Israel could track them, could pick up on their cameras, pick up on their microphones. And that's why they had reverted to these pagers, these walkie-talkies, other types of older technologies that I have not used before. But that certainly backfired in this instance and surprised Hezbollah clearly because they had specifically made the point to use those so that Israel could not do something to the extent of what they've done in the past 2 days, what they've apparently done in the past 2 days.
Yeah,
that alone could pressure Hezbollah to come to an agreement.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, for a lot of young people, the notion of a pager or even a walkie-talkie is something that is not going to be very familiar to people, but it is an older technology which is not as easily tracked as modern cell devices. So now the concern, most likely from the Hezbollah side, is what other devices are the Israelis tracking? In other words, got pagers, you've got walkie-talkie, there could be other devices, we just don't know.
That's right. U.S. officials think that the attacks for now have stopped. But if you're in Lebanon, certainly anything you touch, you put to your face, to your pocket, in your bag, you would be a little paranoid about. Not only if you're a member of Hezbollah, but also if you're a civilian, too.
All right. Eleanor Watson reporting for us from Washington this morning. Ellie, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, the FBI and other U.S. intelligence officials are sharing new details about Iran's efforts to influence the 2024 election, including allegations that Iranian hackers stole information from the Trump campaign and sent it to people connected to President Biden's campaign. Of course, this is unsolicited information from the Biden campaign. The former director of the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, Chris Krebs, joined CBS News 24/7 earlier to discuss the theories surrounding the allegations.
The investigation seems to have begun back in June, so keeping in mind that that was when President Biden was still in the race. How they found out, I think, is still unclear. There are two leading theories. The first is that, well, the Biden campaign notified the FBI, which is what we would encourage as a best practice when any organization, a political campaign or otherwise, receives information or outreach from a foreign intelligence operative. You want to let law enforcement know. The second theory is that the FBI, when they initially became aware of the Robert individual who was sending this stolen information from the Trump campaign to media outlets, when they got information on his AOL account, they were then potentially able to see some of the people that he reached out to, and in that he could have seen a Biden contact or a staffer in that distribution.
All right, joining me now with more on this is CBS News campaign reporter Libby Cathy. So, Libby, as we've been pointing out, this information was allegedly given to the Biden campaign. This was unsolicited from the Biden-Harris campaigns. What's been the reaction from the Trump folks to this election interference?
Yeah, good morning, Vlad. As you said, this was unsolicited, but Trump already out there mischaracterizing what we know so far. Last night at his rally, Trump said this is evidence of Biden spying on his campaign. This is evidence of Kamala Harris illegally spying on his campaign. He called it election interference. But as you said, this was unsolicited. And from what we know so far, from what federal authorities are saying, that is not the conclusion to jump to. But what it shows us is that Trump will probably use this as a rallying cry among his supporters, as we've seen before. And already doing that on Truth Social. His spokesperson also saying this is proof that the Iranians are actively interfering in the election for Democrats. But again, this was unsolicited, and election officials and law enforcement officials really saying this is preliminary, and a lot of questions still remain, and Trump is mischaracterizing this already.
So that's something that he's done ever since the 2020 election, as you know, Libby. And the question is, are there any instances of anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign who does believe that our election integrity is safe and secure? In other words, for a lot of people, what we hear from the former president and others associated with his campaign is essentially trying to set the stage for challenging the election results if they don't go in his favor. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The Trump campaign would deny that, but others are saying this could be setting the stage for a loss. This could be priming supporters to contest the results. And now Trump could say, if he does lose, that, that Iran was spying on him and gave information to the Democrats. And that's the information. That's the reason for his loss, potentially, he could say. Also, we see him already doing this with mail-in ballots as people are starting to vote in early states today. Him shutting doubt on that practice and priming supporters potentially for losing that way. So a lot of different conspiracies get thrown out by this campaign as we are 47 days out from the election.
Libby Cathy reporting. Thank you so much, Libby. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Meanwhile, Vice President Harris today is set to sit down for a live stream interview with Oprah Winfrey. That's happening tonight. The high-profile interview is one of the biggest unions in the country have decided not to endorse either candidate. Okay, I see Shauna Mizell in the screen there, so I know that it's you, Shauna. It's good to see you, my friend. So let's talk about what's happening with the vice president this afternoon. As we just indicated, she's set to do that interview with Oprah Winfrey. How did this all come about, and what do we expect from that interview today?
Vlad, good morning. It's great to see you again today. So that's right. Vice President Kamala Harris is going to be in Michigan participating in this call with Oprah Winfrey. But this comes after the immediate aftermath of Harris being endorsed by Biden. We saw a Black Women for Harris organizing call on Zoom, and that call raised a lot of money for the vice president and really rallied around her candidacy. Now, after that, we also saw other voting groups and demographics coming and doing the same thing, even some fan clubs. So there was White Dudes for Harris, and there was also Swifties for Harris. So this call tonight is going to be a culmination of all of those groups. It's going to be a unity call, and it's going to be to highlight all of those grassroots donations in support of Vice President Kamala Harris.
So, Sean, as you know, both uncommitted voters and Teamsters have said that they are not yet endorsing Vice President Harris. I saw President Trump yesterday at a rally here in New York suggesting that the rank and file of the Teamsters Union was supporting him. But in fact, that's not true. The head of the Teamsters Union says that he's not, the organization as a whole is not endorsing either candidate.
That's right. But this is actually a pretty big blow to Harris and her campaign because the Teamsters are a union of more than 1 million, and they have consistently supported Democratic presidential candidates. But their decision not to endorse Harris, they say that they couldn't get a commitment on the key issues from either candidate, but they are also not supporting former President Donald Trump. And immediately after that decision came down from Teamsters President Sean O'Brien about what the board decided to not endorse, we actually saw a lot of local chapters in key battleground states coming out and saying that they are endorsing Harris.
Yeah, including the chapter in Michigan, which, as you know, Shauna, is a big battleground state, which has come out in support of the vice president. Shauna Mizell reporting from Washington for us this morning. Thank you, Shauna.
Thanks, Vlad.
As a reminder, CBS News will host the only vice presidential debate between Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz on Tuesday, October 1st, right here in New York City. We will have live coverage on CBS and CBS News 24/7 and on Paramount Plus. Okay, we've got some breaking news out of the Middle East. The leader of Hezbollah is speaking right now. Let's toss it over to our partners at the BBC.
Children, thousands were injured. Different type of injuries. The numbers will appease.
على كل مع الوقت ببين العدد ولكن العدد كبير جدا. العدو يفترض
Waiting.
نجي نحكي بنوايا العدو هلا شو صار شيء ثاني.
We will have the exact number, but it is a mass number. It's a big number. The enemy is assuming that let's talking about the intention. What happened? Something else. He's targeting a group, a pager group, which we will talk about in details. He assumed, and he knows that the numbers exceed 4,000 pieces of pages. And he assumed that is the 4,000 they are distributing of the men of Hezbollah, brothers and sisters, in establishments in different units. When he exploded the pages, instruments, he was intending, we have to talk about the intention. He was intending to kill 4,000 individuals in 1 minute. This is the minimum, the least, to kill 4,000 human beings at the moment. That is in addition to what happened on Wednesday for the talkie-walkie. We're still talking about the pager. That is in addition for those whom they will be killed, whom they are surrounding them.
Well, we're going to come away from that. We will continue to monitor what Hassan Nasrallah is saying.
All right, you've been watching our partners at the BBC. We were hearing there a statement from the leader of Hezbollah, Lebanon, saying that the death toll over the last 2 days over those explosions of pagers and of walkie-talkies has risen to 37, some 3,000 people injured. Of course, CBS News has not been able to independently verify that, but we are following the story. Just as we were coming off the air yesterday, we learned of those explosions happening with the walkie-talkies. So we will keep our eyes and ears close to the ground. Our MTS Taib is actually in Lebanon tracking developments, and if there are any, we'll bring them to you live right here on CBS News 24/7. Meanwhile, evacuations are underway in parts of Italy as a powerful storm that brought catastrophic flooding to Central Europe moves into the area. We're following the very latest as residents and officials prepare for the worst. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. President Biden will hold a major economic speech today at the Economic Club of Washington, D.C. It comes just a day after the Federal Reserve cut interest rates for the first time in 4 years. Rates were previously at a 23-year high. You can see how the stock market is doing this morning, up 1%, 430 points. Market seems to like it. CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman is joining me now, following the latest from the White House for us. So, Willie James, what can we expect from the speech today, and how is the White House, even though we stress that the president has no influence on monetary policy, what are they saying about the rates that were cut yesterday by the Fed?
Hey there, Vlad. Good to be with you. Well, the White House, of course, sets aside politics when it comes to those Fed rate cuts, but they are celebrating this, so to speak, essentially saying that the economy is moving in the right direction with the Fed cutting that key benchmark rate because job growth has been great. The president will note that in his speech. According to Jeff Zients, his chief of staff, he'll also talk about inflation and interest rates falling, as we mentioned, those rates coming down from the Fed. At the same time, employment, wages, and GDP growth are on the right direction, on the right track, rising upwards. And the president will likely lay out those key things during his speech. I also want to point to a quote from Zients himself. He said on a press call with reporters yesterday, he said, "This is not meant to be a declaration of victory. It's meant to be a declaration of progress, significant progress." And the president will lay this out, talking about where we've come from the COVID recovery days to the economic recovery and the economic upward trajectory that his administration has helped lead the country with. And that's certainly something we can anticipate that we'll hear from the president. Zients also ran through the president's economic pillars. We'll hear talk about the economic recovery. He'll also talk about supply chains and bringing jobs back to the United States. Just a little bit of a preview of what we anticipate we'll hear from the president, not only to those in the room today, but also to the American people, because it's important, Vlad, that the president lay out what his economic vision and his economic recovery has been during his administration. And of course, he's going to perhaps lay out how he's passing on the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris if she were to be elected president, and how she would steer the economy. Vlad.
Willie James, let me ask you about this bill to fund the government yesterday that did not pass the House yesterday. Speaker Mike Johnson spoke about what's next for Congress. I want to play a little bit of what he had to say, and then we'll talk about it.
We missed that. We ran the play. It was the best play. It was the right one. And so now we go back to the playbook. We'll draw up another play, and we'll come up with a solution. I'm already talking to colleagues about their many ideas. We have time to fix the situation, and we'll get right to it.
So any reaction, Willie James, from the White House?
Yeah, the White House has really been tight-lipped about this, letting Republicans fall on their swords, so to speak, in terms of the implosion of this vote yesterday. The Democrats largely voting along party lines, but Republicans have a slim majority in the House. Let's remember that. And they didn't get enough votes to pass this bill. The vote fell short, 202 in favor, 220 opposed for the SAVE Act. And there's a provision in the SAVE Act, we should also point out, Vlad, that would make it illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. That is already the case. But this House Speaker, Mike Johnson, saying that there's no federal mechanism to enforce it. That's why, in large part, you have Democrats balking at voting for this. On the other side of this, Democrats are trying to come up with a more short-term plan to fund the government for the next few months. It's unclear if that'll happen, but there's some work being done in the Senate to do just that. Vlad.
All right, Willie James Inman reporting from the White House for us this morning. Thank you, Willie James. Okay, let's talk about weather now. Parts of Central Europe are underwater due to devastating flooding from storms. The destruction spans from Romania to Poland. At least 23 people have been killed so far. And now the storm is moving towards northern Italy. At least 1,000 people have been forced to evacuate amid the flooding threats. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is following this and the aftermath of the storm. It's so good to see you, Ramy. Talk to me about the scope of the devastation that Italians are suffering under right now.
Hey, Vlad. Yeah, and that number of dead from those floods from Storm Boris continues to rise. A couple more in just the past day, 23 in the past week. At least 3 more people confirmed dead since we spoke yesterday. Parts of northern Italy getting flooded, and with a focus on the Emilia-Romagna region. If you're not familiar, this is the region just south of Milan and north of Florence. The region's chief said that it rained for more than 2 days nonstop. There you see it on the screen right there. But thankfully that he said, only 3 rivers overflowed, and that's because 23 last year overflowed in even worse flooding there. So it's all relative. Schools and rail services are now reportedly shut in several provinces across Italy today. And while it's water in Italy, over in Portugal on the Atlantic coast, it's fire there. Firefighters in the north, they're still working after the past 5 days, but there's good news here. This morning, officials said that about 60 fires were almost out, but that nearly 20 are still raging. But they're also saying that help is on the way with cooler weather coming today, along with higher humidity, some rains in the central part of Portugal. But UN Chief Antonio Guterres had to weigh in on this, saying that the fires and the floods that we're seeing right now hitting Europe are because of climate change, he says, something that many people have already been saying. The tragedies we're seeing, the loss of homes and the loss of lives at a cost of likely hundreds of millions of dollars. And he says this is needless, this is tragic, and it is because of us.
All right, Ramy Inocencio reporting for London. Ramy, thank you.
You bet.
All right, Diddy remains behind bars this morning after being denied bail a second time in his federal sex trafficking case. Where the legal case goes next, you're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we are following. A wagon lost control on a tour of an apple orchard in Chippewa County, Wisconsin. According to officials, two hay wagons collided, careening down a hill. Officials say at least 25 people, including children, were taken to a hospital. This is a big story. CBS News has reached out to the orchard, but we have not yet heard back. Hope the kids are okay. Wow, what a story. All right, a weeks-long manhunt in Kentucky is over this morning. Police believe they found the body of the alleged Kentucky highway shooter, Joseph Couch. According to authorities, the body was found near the same interstate exit where the shooting happened. He allegedly opened fire on the highway, hitting several cars and injuring 5 people earlier this month. 2 troopers and 2 civilians came upon the body. The couple appeared to be live streaming the discovery online. And heading over to Virginia this morning, the cargo ship that crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge, causing it to come crashing down, is set to head to China. The Dolly has been docked in Norfolk at the Port of Virginia as it underwent repairs following the deadly collision in Baltimore that happened back in March. This comes as the Department of Justice announced a $100 million lawsuit against the ship's owners, claiming negligence and cost-cutting decisions that led to the collision. All right, back to our top story. A second wave of high-tech attacks hit Lebanon. Officials say dozens of people have been killed and thousands injured in 2 days of attacks. Both Lebanon and the Hezbollah militant group have blamed Israel for the explosions. Israel has yet to officially comment on the attacks, but its military says it's entering a new phase of the war. Let's toss it to our partners at the BBC.
Confirming again that there are more strikes that they are carrying out on targets in Lebanon. What are you hearing?
So that's right. So just before Hassan Nasrallah began speaking a short while ago, the Israel Defense Forces put out a statement saying the IDF is currently striking Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. The Hezbollah it goes on to say the IDF is operating to bring security to northern Israel in order to enable the return of residents to their homes, as well as to achieve all of the war goals. And following that, we began to see reports on social media channels here of airstrikes taking place in Lebanon. I got a message a few moments ago from a BBC colleague who is in Beirut who reported that there was a fighter jet seen above Beirut. So it does seem that there are airstrikes taking place. The IDF has confirmed that. Obviously, as we know, there's been airstrikes taking place for a long time now because Hezbollah has been firing rockets and drones into Israel. Israel has been carrying out airstrikes. Whether this is a larger operation remains to be seen, but we're certainly seeing quite a lot of reports of airstrikes. And as I say, a colleague saying that they'd seen a jet also above Beirut.
Daniel, I'll be back to you.
All right, you've been listening to our partners at the BBC. Obviously, they are covering this story that is developing across Lebanon. Israeli intelligence being alleged to be the ones that have put these explosive devices in walkie-talkies and cell phone pagers. Clearly, developments are ongoing. BBC's on the ground. We have a team on the ground. We'll continue to monitor this and bring you updates as news is warranted. Meanwhile, closer to home, today in Washington, 4 defendants are facing sentencing for their involvement in the January 6th Capitol insurrection. Some of those defendants were among the first rioters to charge through police lines. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland is at a federal courthouse watching all the developments. Scott, you've been covering January 6th since the very day that it happened. What do we know about these suspects? And more importantly, what's significant about these cases? We keep saying that they're some of the first that arrived on the scene on January 6th.
Yeah, Vlad, we've had our eye on this case from the jump. It was one of the first ones filed back in 2021, just now going to sentencing. The names are not familiar, but they're James Grant, Paul Johnson, Stephen Randolph, and Jason Blythe. But what prosecutors allege is they were the tip of the spear. They were among the first to breach the police lines, topple officers, injure officers, and it was hundreds, if not thousands, who followed this group of 4 into the Capitol to attack the Capitol on January 6th. Prosecutors are going to ask for about 9 years in prison for each of the 4, saying they were injuring police officers, they were inciting, if not inspiring, other rioters to follow them, and that they were distinctively violent. This group caught the attention of the nation when the House January 6th Select Committee did its primetime national hearings back in 2022, and they showed some of what this frontline group did to officers, injuring police who were trying to stop them, removing those metal barricades, which were so critical for the rioters to get through. We'll see what the judge says today when it comes time for sentencing, not just, Vlad, in the sentence she issues, but whether federal Judge Gia Cobb echoes her colleagues here and warns that without proper deterrence, there is risk of unrest after the 2024 elections, too.
And Scott, how could the sentencing here impact other defendants waiting sentencing?
Every case lays down a marker for the hundreds of January 6 defendants who still have to have their cases closed and go to sentencing. But we've heard in the last few weeks a distinctive escalation in some of the rhetoric from prosecutors and judges saying at this unique moment, at this politically toxic moment, with there already being arguments out there that are undercutting the significance and the integrity of the 2024 elections, it's important to send a message of deterrence, that anybody who tries to overturn an election is going to go to prison. You really can feel the tension in the air in these courtrooms over the past few months as we get closer and closer to November 5th.
Wow. All right, Scott McFarland reporting for us this morning. Thank you, Scott. All right, time now for some weather. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Sousa with the first look at the national forecast. Tammy.
Well, hello, Vlad, and happy Friday Eve. We're going to talk about a couple of things that are actually important, especially if you live in the midsection of the country. Let's talk about these clouds that you see that are moving out of the plains and the Rockies, and they are headed toward the upper Midwest. Well, those actually happen to be clouds that are associated with some severe weather, and because of that, we are going to be keeping a very close eye on a line of storms that will develop. Look at this, moving through possibly parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, and all the way over into Iowa, maybe even Missouri. So this is something we're going to be watching very, very closely for today. There's also associated with that line a tornado risk. We could have severe weather with damaging winds, large hail, but there is a tornado risk, and that extends through much of Minnesota into Wisconsin and through Iowa, not into Illinois. That's where you could possibly just see some of the damaging winds. Places like Chicago should be on guard. Now, we also have coastal flood advisories, again, because we have that area of low pressure that is still churning up the sea. And so all the way from the Jersey Shore down through parts of the Carolinas, you could see perhaps a foot or more of inundation. The usual places. We also have heat that is building. I mean heat. We're talking about triple digits building from the southern plains, and this is going to extend into the upper Midwest. Cooler air filtering in to the west. You can see the jet stream taking a nice dip. Now, throughout the weekend, we're going to watch this shift slightly. The cool air will then dip into parts of the southern plains, but it will build. This heat will build across the Tennessee Valley and the south. So this is what you're looking at for today. Look at this. Comfortable 72 in L.A., below 100 in Phoenix. We're looking at 70s, even some 60s up towards Seattle today. This is where the heat is building. Look at this. You've got triple digits. You've got the upper 90s, and this doesn't even include the feels like that heat index. And then we're going to head off to the East Coast, where, of course, it's hot in Miami. But look at the Northeast. Not so bad. We have clouds and a little bit of sunshine building in for us. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Tammy, always great to talk to you. Thank you. We'll check in with you just a little bit later. Let's talk about Sean Diddy Combs, who is still now behind bars this morning after a second judge denied him bail as he faces federal sex trafficking and racketeering charges. Combs was arrested on Monday in New York. In his latest appeal, he offered to give up $50 million and restrict his female visitors to just members of his own family. He now waits in jail for what could be at least a year before his trial begins. Joining me now from our Studio 57 is CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano. Lilia, so as you know, Diddy offered up that $50 million and a slew of restrictions. He wanted to be released on home detention. What reasons did the judge give for denying that bail?
Well, Vlad, the main reasons are that the defense team was not able to prove that he's not a flight risk, despite the fact that the defense team presented that he's trying to sell his airplane, that the plane would not be anywhere near him, that he has surrendered his passport, and so would his children. The other reason is because of the safety or concerns for the safety of the community. They're saying that he could potentially still be a danger to the community, despite no women coming into the house and no visitors that are unmonitored. They proposed a team, an independent surveillance team made up of former law enforcement officers who would be monitoring anybody who goes in and out of the house, where they were proposing that he would go into house arrest. But the issue is that they are also concerned beside flight risk and safety, that he could impact the investigation negatively. Basically, what the judge was concerned about and what the prosecution was presenting is that he could enter into some kind of indirect communication to threaten witnesses or victims, citing other communications that had allegedly happened in the past. So they're saying, despite him being in this place, in this jail in Brooklyn that has been known as a very decrepit and maintained or ill-maintained jail, where people have died by suicide this year, where there have been inmates who have been stabbed to death or beaten to death, where there have been multiple staff members who have had issues with corruption, with smuggling, and have faced charges, and where the jail is severely understaffed, something just over 50% of the amount of employees that should be there per inmate is what the staffing looks like. For now, it sounds like he will remain there. The judges denied bail, both of them. Now his team is saying that they're going to appeal and that they're also trying to move him to a different jail in New Jersey.
All right, Lilia, Luciana, thank you very much for that reporting. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Vlad.
New York City police are defending the accidental shooting of an innocent bystander on a subway platform, but his family is demanding a full investigation. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, let's take you now to Capitol Hill, where Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is speaking. He is joined by other Senate Democrats talking about the conservative agenda known as Project 2025, something that the former president, Donald Trump, has disavowed. Let's watch.
Because we're exposing it. Thank you, everybody. It's been nice meeting with you all.
He's in a good mood.
Okay. All right. I do want to thank Senators Stabenow, Klobuchar, Blumenthal, Schatz, and Warnock for being here. And each of them talking about a portion of 2025. There is so much in it. We could be here every day for a long time. But Senator Stabenow will talk about middle-class taxes, Klobuchar on democracy, Blumenthal on border security, Schatz on national security, and Warnock on workers' rights. Now, last week, Senate Democrats came together to shine a light on just some of the dangers of Project 2025. So last week, we sounded an alarm on all of the ways Project 2025 would decimate American education, women's reproductive freedoms, our veterans, housing, and more. But of course, that's just a fraction of the horrors that Project 2025 holds. That's why today we will highlight a few others that hold grave consequences for American families, our national security, and our very democracy. So we're here to shine a light on Project 2025 once again. This time by looking at ways it would raise taxes, hurt American workers, compromise border security, threaten our democracy, and make America less safe. And as we go over each issue, I want to remind everybody, this is the Trump plan. Project 2025 has been led by former Trump officials who put together a blueprint of what they want to get done should Trump, God forbid, get in office. So this is the Trump plan led by so many of his former employees, and they said it. The Heritage Foundation, who he relies on, said this is what we're going to do. So make no mistake about it. They're trying to run away from it now because it's so devastating for just about every American, but that's the plan. Make no mistake about it. Excuse me if we take Donald Trump's attempts to distance himself from Project 2025 with the world's largest grain of salt. Donald Trump, a few years ago, said that the Heritage Foundation would...
All right, folks, you've been listening to Senator Chuck Schumer, along with other members of the Democratic leadership in the United States Senate, talking about a number of issues, but specifically focusing here on Project 2025, the conservative movement, which has been drafted by people close to the Trump administration, but the former president himself has denied any involvement in that project. We're going to keep an eye on what's happening there in the Hill, bring you news as warranted. Meanwhile, here in New York City, police officials are defending an officer-involved shooting last weekend that left several people wounded, including innocent bystanders. It happened at a crowded subway station, and the family of one of those shot is now demanding a full investigation. CBS News New York reporter Christina Fan is following the story.
Good morning. 49-year-old Gregory Delpash was accidentally shot in the head by police while on his way to work over the weekend. This morning, he remains in critical condition at the hospital as his family demands a full investigation and the release of body camera video. For a second night in a row yesterday, demonstrators protested the Brooklyn subway shooting, jumping turnstiles as police stood nearby. 16 people were later taken away in handcuffs. Police say Sunday's shooting all started when 38-year-old Darrell Mickles jumped the turnstile at Sutter Avenue and later advanced towards officers with a knife, ignoring their commands. Police say their tasers were ineffective, so they pulled out their guns, firing 9 rounds, which struck the suspect, a responding officer, and 2 innocent bystanders. Delpash's family called the officers' actions reckless. The NYPD says body camera footage will be released in the coming days. Reporting from East Flatbush, Brooklyn, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
All right, coming up, we're going to take a closer look at how cities in California are preparing for the next round of wildfires, as the state is still fighting several fast-moving blazes. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Dealing with fast-moving wildfires has become a way of life for many communities in the western United States, so many city managers are preparing for the worst possible scenario. CBS News Sacramento reporter Brady Hadley shows us the steps Lake Tahoe is taking.
With more than 40,000 full-time residents and millions of visitors each year, finding ways to manage everyone in the Tahoe Basin during an emergency situation requires cooperation.
The idea was to come together as a team and look at all of our plans, ensure they're all up to date.
But a new plan created by 23 agencies surrounding the lake aims to make sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to evacuations.
But one thing this plan did was bring us all together more than we have been before.
Right now, each county and jurisdiction around the lake has its own evacuation routes and plans. But this document creates a one-stop shop for real-time emergency information.
I think we all recognize in Tahoe, with so many responsibility areas around the lake, sometimes people don't know where they're at, where to sign up for alerts, where to get information.
It includes things like which alert and warning systems emergency crews will use, shelter locations, and evacuation routes.
When you live in a county such as El Dorado County, where we do get wildfires, and evacuations are a real thing.
The El Dorado County Office of Emergency Services says this information is vital given the limited number of roads in and out of the Tahoe Basin.
Just kind of having to grab everything really fast and go.
Something that proved to be an issue during evacuations from the Caldor fire, with hours-long backups along Highway 50 in South Lake Tahoe. Additionally, in the event of an evacuation, evacuees will likely need to travel to neighboring counties for assistance, making regional cooperation essential.
So it's important for us to all work together, because for a timely evacuation, we don't just have to coordinate with our own sheriff's office or the local police department. We have to coordinate with these other states and counties to make it happen. Because, you know, the key to evacuating that area is traffic flow.
NASA's Hidden Figures have been honored with the Congressional Gold Medal. The families of Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, and Christine Darden were at the Capitol yesterday to accept the awards on their behalf. Congress gave its highest civilian honor to the women who contributed to the space race, including the black mathematicians portrayed in the 2016 movie Hidden Figures. Their work on the Apollo program helped the first astronauts land on the moon. House Speaker Mike Johnson said the award was a long time coming. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Souza with the last look at the national forecast. Tammy, over to you.
Oh, you know what? We're looking at a fairly quiet. We have a couple of little spots to keep an eye on. We have some light showers across the East Coast, but it is across the heartland where you see that big spin and that little line coming down all the way through the plains that we actually have severe weather that we're going to keep a very close eye on. Let's take a look at the big picture across the nation. Now, again, we are watching that threat of severe weather, and that extends all the way from Minnesota through Wisconsin into Illinois, Iowa, all the way down to the very northern parts of Texas. That's where we could see severe weather today. It is also going to be hot. It's going to start to really build in the heat across the southern plains and into the upper Midwest. Along the East Coast, it'll be a little bit cool in some places. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds, a few scattered showers across the mid-Atlantic region and across Florida. And then if we go out to the west, it's a little bit cooler than average in California, and that's where we're going to be looking at perhaps some light showers. We're looking at very little activity in the tropics, but we are keeping an eye on the Caribbean and the Gulf for next week. Vlad?
All right, Tammy. Appreciate you. Talk to you tomorrow. Folks, an encore of CBS Mornings is coming up next. This is CBS News 24/7.